journalists with us. Let us start with the topic that were with us over the recent weeks. We were preparing for our main holiday, the 9th of May. The point is that, of course, this special year goes on, and there will be a lot to do with this topic, as well as in any other year and any other day that is full of memory, of historic memory for us. I would like to especially mention this huge contribution by our diplomats and foreign missions. They did it together with our compatriots. I'd like to say that the celebrations were huge abroad. It's no secret that the Victory Day unites us truly. And we celebrated it together with friends of our country from all over the world. Tens of thousands of people participated, many memorial events all over the world. Around the clock, the celebrations were covered in our accounts of foreign ministry. Some statistics: since early May, more than 5,000 of posts were posted dedicated to the Victory Day. 5,500 materials. This marathon did not stop for a second. People on all the continents, in all parts of the world, proudly showed the symbols of victory and defended the memory of those heroes who defended our right to live and to be a human being. Of course, we shared not only these events, we shared happiness and impressions, the accounts of foreign ministers. The parade were broadcast with commentary in 12 languages. Thanks to our colleagues from REUTERS agencies who helped us with this. The World Action, the Eternal Regiment, took place in more than 120 countries in the world. And they told that we are isolated. Tens of thousands of our compatriots participated in the celebrations. They went through blackmail, threats, but they did it anyway. They preserved the memories of the heroes of World War II. In more than 80 countries, there were actions dedicated to heroes of the Great Patriotic War. All of the events were high profile, but there were some special events. We launched a project, Songs of the Victory, in the style of vinyl discs. I'm happy that that many people liked the project. This initiative was truly popular. People shared it and with their friends and families. This project was participated by 2.5 million users of the Telegram platform. It's fantastic. Thank you for caring. Special attention by Russian diplomats and compatriots belonged to memorial events, wreath-laying ceremonies in more than 70 countries. People tended to the burial sites of POWs and soldiers, and the conditions were really severe amid continued the so-called war against monuments. On the General Consulate in Bonn, held 130 events. A lot of memorials were attended by a lot of people with symbols of the Great Patriotic War. In Austria, the complex Mauthausen was participated by family members, and I give those examples because I cannot give you all the examples. There's more. Because unfortunately we have to confirm that in a number of countries, for example in Poland, Germany, those events took place amid provocations from collaborationists, the supporters of the neo-Nazi Kiev regime, with the acquiescence of the local law enforcement. Nevertheless, all the memorial events did take place. There were memorial services to the Red Army soldiers. Special words of gratitude on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs I would like to give to the choir of Teretsky. For 10 years, this team tour all over the world with the words of the victory. They sang songs despite everything on the main squares of many countries, in the concert halls, in our foreign missions. They were not threatened. This was the something that the Mr. Turetsky received from his father, to share the art and historical truth to all generations now in the 21st century. And of course, with special pride, we saw the broadcast from the hall of the General Assembly of the UN that brought together veterans and their children. They sang songs together with the choir of Turetsky. Our website will have a special section dedicated not to this anniversary of victory, and there are hundreds of them, believe me, that already have taken place and will take place. All general consulates on all our foreign missions and Рассотрудничество, our diplomat that contributed to the implementation of these events will be mentioned there, and their contribution will be duly covered. We'll do everything we can for that, because these things should be recorded. Now let's go to the relevant agenda. Let's start with the schedule of Foreign Minister. Today, in several hours, Sergei Lavrov is going to participate in the first session of the Diplomatic Club that renews its activities through thematic events with the participation of diplomatic corps under the auspices of the Diplomatic Academy of MFA of Russia. Minister will give a speech, talk to the leaders of diplomatic missions accredited in Moscow, as well as to take place in the round table titled Culture Without Borders, Role and Development of the Diplomacy of Culture. And of course, the topic of the Great Patriotic War, World War II, will be mentioned for many times during our briefing, because everything to do with today's relevant agenda continues the problems, unresolved problems, or that renewed, unfortunately, about the Ukrainian crisis. President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, on May 11th, put forward an initiative to renew direct negotiations that were suspended by the Kiev regime on behest of the then British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. I'll remind you, in the spring of 2022. At the same time, President of Russia proposed starting these negotiations without delay or preconditions in Istanbul on May 15th. As the Russian president said, the essence of this negotiation is, I quote, remove the root causes of the conflicts to establish a long-lasting and durable peace with a historical outlook in mind. We said many times the Russian side is prepared for serious negotiations. The Russian the delegation arrived to Istanbul and is prepared to serious work. Now about what's going on in Ukraine, I mean the actions of the Kiev regime, just to understand what they are doing there while talking about ceasefire. In reality, they are doing what you are going to hear. The neo-Nazi regime of Zelensky did everything it could to prevent the celebrations of the 18th anniversary of victory in the Great Patriotic War in Ukraine. This war of the ancestors of the current citizens of Ukraine, it's their victory as well. And it was desecrated. They did everything they could to cast a shadow on the celebrations, to this existential holiday for Ukraine. There were attempts to undermine the celebrations abroad, first of all in Russia. But these attempts were in vain. The modern Banderovich did not manage to intimidate people or to forget about the memory of those who saved the world from the brown plague and gave them life. Many people in Ukraine on May the 9th came to memorials to the Soviet soldiers. Despite everything, despite prohibitions and blackmail threats, despite the fact that many monuments in modern Ukraine were destroyed or changed until they cannot be recognized. They came to lay flowers and to bow to true heroes. There were provocations from the Ukrainian nationalists in Kiev. In the Park of Glory, the policemen arrested an elderly woman because she refused to take off the side cap with the red star. In Odessa, a sign plate on the memorial to Marshal Rodion Malinovsky was taken down. He commanded the Third Ukrainian Front that liberated in April 1944 this city. On May 10th at night in Odessa, a group of young vandals destroyed all the flowers laid on the memorial to the unknown sailor. But the junta of Zelensky did not manage to do what they wanted. They couldn't break the will of people and did what they wanted while threatening people. They did not destroy the memory to the ancestors. The memory turned out to be stronger. It couldn't be destroyed. Unlike the neo-Nazi clique, it will go on forever. Let's see how the Kiev regime in general follows the ceasefire, as they're talking about ceasefire all the time, but they just cynically ignored it. The president of Russia declared a 72-hour ceasefire dedicated to the 80th anniversary of victory over Nazism. According to Defense Ministry of Russia, there were 14,043 violations of ceasefire, more than 4,000 shellings from artillery, tanks and mortars, 62 attacks with MLRS, 9,918 drone attacks. There were 5 attempts to cross the Russian border in the Belgorod and Kursk regions over the 3 days, sacred for all of us. The Ukrainian aggression killed 6 people and wounded at least 17. This is the reality, not an illusion. This is the ceasefire demonstrated by the Kiev regime. Unfortunately, before and after the holiday, the Ukrainian militants continued terror against people in pre-border Russian regions. From May 6th through 13th, shellings, drones and mines killed 4 civilians, including volunteer Alexander Kelengeridze, who earlier saved about 400 people in the Kursk region. On May 7th, in the Homotovka region, the Ukrainian militants launched drone attacks on the church of Dmitry Salunsky. On May 10th, in the village of Komunar, a drone harmed the memorial to the Soviet pilots. They made targeted strikes on civilian infrastructure. In the Belgrade region, Ukrainian Nazis targeted civilian facilities and vehicles. At least 10 civilians were wounded. On May 9th, a drone struck the building of the government of the Belgrade region in DPR. Because of the Banderovich strikes, 2 people were killed, at least 9 wounded, including 3 teenagers. 3 people on the Victory Day were harmed. A 16-year-old teenager were wounded in the village of Krynichne on May 12th. In the Kalininsky district of Gorlovka, a drone dropped an explosive, wounding a 14-year-old teenager. In Luhansk, on May 13, the Ukrainian forces attacked with drones an asphalt and concrete factory. They also targeted a team of rescuers arrived to the scene. 2 rescuers died, at least 15 wounded. On May the 7th, in the city of Lashki, a Ukrainian drone attacked an ambulance. A paramedic was wounded. Similar strike against ambulance was committed in the Victory Day in the village of Nova Zbryovka. On May 9th, 8 populated areas in the Kherson region were attacked. On May 6th, the Kiev regime, with kamikaze drones, damaged memorial to liberators. On the eve of the Victory Day in Kakhovka, the Russian security service arrested 3 Ukrainian people who planned to explode a bomb not far from the memorial T-34 tank. In the Bryansk region, there were also attacks against populated areas, including against a school in the village of Sapichi. They never stopped before harming children. It's their philosophy. As to their sponsored and curators, we saw all this get-together in Kiev on May 10th of the European leaders of war, including President of France, Chancellor of Germany, Prime Ministers of Great Britain, Poland. It was presented as the presentation of the main representatives of the coalition of the willing. In words, they talk about unwavering support to the Zelensky regime, and in reality, they try to find a better way to implement the military intervention in Ukraine. They don't even hide this. The main outcome of that meetup was issuing an ultimatum to Russia about its unconditional support of the 30-day ceasefire that will start on May 12th, in which the Kiev regime and its European patrons have decided to spontaneously declare. They have obviously forgot that at that moment when they thought about this step, the ceasefire introduced by Russia on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of victory hasn't expired. What were their threats again? They threatened to reinforce sanctions against our country, but they forgot that the language of ultimatums is unacceptable for our country. I remember that 80 years ago, they issued ultimatums to our country, and recently we have celebrated the victory over those who tried to speak with us by using force. And we are thankful to everyone who is still working and risking their life. The Russian courts continue to pass sentences on Ukrainian neo-Nazis and mercenaries for their war crimes and other crimes. The Ukrainian soldiers Lev Kirov, Ruslan Poltoratsky and Andrei Vlasenko were sentenced to 17 years in prison. They hindered at gunpoint They used force and threatened with force against civilians who tried to evacuate from the Kursk region. Lev Kirov and Andrei Vlasenko also laid mines on the road. The Ukrainian terrorist Anton Tabaluk was sentenced to 16 years in prison. He intimidated the residents of the Kursk region and who took part in the illegal blockage of Sudzha. We have completed the investigations with regard to the Lithuanian national Valdas Bartkevičius. During his illegal stay in the Kursk region on November 11, 2024, in Kazachia Lokna village with other two Lithuanian nationals, they have took actions to desecrate the burial site and the memorial to the heroes and liberators. It was also established that in November 2024, this criminal has acquired 5 cars and provided them to Lithuanian mercenaries from the so-called International Legion, as well as to the units of the 95th Separate Air Assault Brigade and 225th Separate Storm Battalion of the Armed Forces of Ukraine that carried out terrorist acts on the territory of the Kursk region. It's quite characteristic that in his public video address, Valdas Bartkevičius has expressed his approval to the act of terrorism in Crocus City Hall, and all the criminal records were submitted to court, and he was put on the international wanted list. The U.S. mercenary Jake Logan Taylor, Azerbaijani mercenary Sabir Oglirzaev, and Colombian mercenary Elias Osorio Jose Bernardo were sentenced to 14 years in prison. The former Ukrainian ambassador in Kazakhstan, Pyotr Vrublevsky, was sentenced to 6 years in prison in absentia. Earlier, he was put by the Russian Ministry of Interior on international wanted list, and he's accused of inciting hatred and enmity. In his interview, he made these distorted extremist ideas. He gave an interview to the Kazakh blogger in August 2022, and he stated, and I quote, "Think about it. It was a diplomat of the Kiev regime who said that. He said, and I quote, we're trying to kill as many Russians as possible. The more Russians we kill, the less our children will have to kill." End of quote. And the true Sabbath was organized in Lvov, and was organized by the participants of the Coalition of the Willing. Zelensky and its European patrons have sincerely tried to undermine, but as soon as they realized, they tried to
cast a shadow on May 9th when we celebrated the 80th anniversary of victory. Well, they have actually caused problems to themselves. What have they done? On May 9th, they have organized a shameful meeting in Lvov, and it was the meeting of EU foreign ministers, which was led by the high, but I should say low, representative of the EU on foreign affairs and security policy, Kaja Kallas. It was expected that they will publicly proclaim the establishment of the special tribunal on the Russian aggression, as they say, against Ukraine, but they decided not to do that, and they limited to words of supporting such a reckless scheme, and they preferred to do the usual thing, which is the discussion of providing the Kiev regime with further military assistance. In particular, Kaja Kallas pledged another 1 billion euros in the interests of the Ukrainian military-industrial complex and the expense of the EU nationals, because their opinion is not taken into account. The money will be used for the production of drones and missiles, and Brussels also plans to allocate another 900 million euros of revenues from the immobilized Russian assets, or I should say stolen Russian assets, and they are going to use it in the military needs of Ukraine. In the similar legal way, France plans to carry out the technical maintenance of Caesar howitzers earlier provided to Ukraine, and Germany plans to send 125 American long-range missiles ATACMS to Ukraine, as well as 100 interceptors PAC-3 for Patriot air defense systems. And militarization of Ukraine was high on the agenda of EU-Ukraine Second Defense Forum that took place in Brussels on May 12th. They even agreed to increase their interaction and production of weapons. Just imagine what their life could be if they implemented the Normandy format. They could allocate billions of funds for the development of Ukrainian regions that would be reintegrated back into Ukraine based on the Normandy agreements. They would build plants and factories. They will produce new cars. They will improve their education system. But that's wasn't in the plans of the collective West, but they just wanted to turn Ukraine into a silent tool of inflicting the strategic defeat on Russia. The EU has recently become the largest non-commercial investor, not in the development of Ukraine, but rather in the development of the Ukrainian military-industrial complex. But this military-industrial complex aims to kill the Ukrainian citizens. All of that is a convincing proof that the EU seeks to continue military actions and to escalate them. Brussels spare no expense and reduces its social expenditures and costs on other spheres. According to the recently published data, the EU total funding of the Zelensky regime since February 2022 is estimated at 147 billion euros. 50.3 billion euros were allocated in military assistance for Ukraine. And again, another bill on Ukraine that demonstrates that the Ukrainian leadership is still interested in continuing the bloodshed, and it is indicated by the plans declared by the deputy head of the office of the president of Ukraine, Irina Vereshchuk, to submit to the consideration of the Verkhovna Rada a bill that will provide systematic training for Ukrainian citizens how to act in the conditions of war, including education on territorial defense and civil resistance. This initiative is in fact a disguised general mobilization of the Ukrainian population to ensure a long-lasting war until the last Ukrainian. Well, given these bills and legislations, Kiev has no thoughts about reaching peace. That's why the special military operation is relevant. I understand that we will the situation in Ukraine is one of the main topics of our briefing, and we will go back to it, and let's discuss the situation in Moldova. The celebrations of the 80th anniversary of victory of the multinational Soviet people in the Great Patriotic War has revealed the ideological abyss between the Moldovan authorities and the deeply patriotic people of this country. In the lead up to this sacred holiday for Moldovans, official Chisinau continued its cynical and reckless fashion to take steps to rewrite the history of the Great Patriotic War. Just look at what they're doing. On April 29th, another cemetery of Romanian heroes was opened in Opich, Kaushan district. Probably these were poets of the 17th century or artists of the beginning of the 19th century. Who are those heroes? These are the heroes who fought in the Antonescu army and died in summer 1941 during the invasion by the Romanian German fascist troops in the Soviet Union. On the night of May 9th, unknown vandals have desecrated the memorial to the soldiers of the 161st Firearms Regiment of the 95th Moldovan Firearms Division in the Hinchersky district. And as earlier, the official authorities hasn't reacted to that in any possible way. According to the mass media, the Ministry of Education and Research of Moldova banned the teachers of educational facilities to take part in the Immortal Regiment action, and they threatened them to not attest those workers or even to fire them. What is the Immortal Regiment? The Immortal Regiment, when people wear portraits, take portraits and carry in their hands portraits of their ancestors, grandfathers, grandmothers, their family members who fought in the Great Patriotic War. That's their symbol, their pride, their memory. That's what the Immortal Regiment is about. But now it is forbidden by the Kiev regime and now by the Chisinau regime. On May 5th, the Moldovan Ministry of Education has ordered that obliged all schools of the country to show on May 9th to the students from the 5th to the 12th years of studies the pseudo-documentary movie Siberia from Bones, which is fully permeated with the Russophobic ideology. In Moldova, the people call it an act of psychological pressure on children. Only after parents of some students filed a lawsuit about screening of such a movie in schools, such movie was deleted from the internet and its screenings were forbidden. I should also inform you about a new textbook, The History of Romanians and General History for the 12th year of studies. And when it was created, according to Moldovan specialists, they used various techniques of history falsifications that is practiced in Western countries, like the defeat of the fascist troops. Again, I'm talking about the textbook for the children in Moldova, and it says that the defeat of the fascist troops near Stalingrad is called, and I quote, a catastrophe, and I agree, it's a catastrophe. But it was a catastrophe for the Nazi troops, but the textbook says that it was just a catastrophe in general that could be avoided. And does it mention the siege of Leningrad? No, it doesn't mention it at all. These events and other events are estimated not on the basis of historical facts, but through the prism of subjective memorials of eyewitnesses, some woman from the liberated Berlin, who saw the Soviet soldiers as savages and thieves. The Moldovan authorities again refused the organizers to carry out massive events in the central square of Chisinau to celebrate the Day of Victory. Instead, they celebrated the Day of Europe, and they opened the European city presentation there. Well, that's some interesting treatment of Moldavians. They call them Romanians. They explain them that their language is a Romanian language and not a Moldovan language. And now they are building European cities there, and they're refusing Moldovans what they cannot refuse them just based on the law of physics, because Moldova is situated in Europe and has always been situated there. What European cities are we talking about? Because Moldova is a European country. It's a part of the European civilization. But now, they are going to build cities, they're going to invent something else, introducing some other aspects in their life, just ignoring the fact that what lies after that is just the abyss. But despite the attempts of the Moldovan authorities, there were huge ceremonies and celebrations that were dedicated to the 80th anniversary of Great Victory. These were unprecedented celebrations. Nearly 150,000 people on both sides of the Dniester River attended the Mortal Regiment actions and the March of the Victory, the international action memory candle. There were music concerts where military songs were performed. There were so many other actions and exhibitions, and the Eternal Flame was lit in Beltsacha, Komrat, Orgev, and Tereklin, based on the particle of the eternal flame from the unknown soldier grave in Moscow. And the European city in Chisinau looked rather bleak and lifeless. Attempts of the official Chisinau to rewrite the history of Moldova won't work, because the majority of Moldovans cherish the memory about the heroic feat of the Red Army soldiers who heroically sacrificed their lives in the fight against a common enemy. And their descendants will fight against the attempts of the historical revanchist attempts taken by the followers of the Nazi criminals. The persecutions against those in Moldova who are not afraid to speak their mind on the historical truth continue. On May 12th, the Chisinau court has extended the house arrest for the head of Gagauzia, Yelena Gutsul. On what ground have they done that? They call themselves a democratic country, and according to the current leadership, they seek to increase democratization in their country. But again, they take action against political opponents and political figures who were legitimately chosen by their people. They organize persecutions against them. The defense of Yevgenia Gutsul is going to challenge that decision, and it shows that they are not guided by the interests of their country, but it is a question what country Maya Sandu views as its own, and they act at the instigation of their Western handlers. On May 4th, Mette Frederiksen, who spoke on the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Denmark, stated the words that distort the historical truth. I repeat, it was said by Prime Minister of Denmark, while in May 1945, the whole country was in the ceremonious euphoria. Soviet bombs, as the Danish Prime Minister said, were dropped on the cities Nexe and Reni, and after that Bornholm was under Soviet occupations for a whole year. And let's just help the Danish Prime Minister to remember what happened in those cities 80 years ago. 80 years ago, the Red Army soldiers have expelled the Nazi invaders from the Danish territory, Bornholm Island, on May 7th and 8th, 1945, after the German commanders refused to capitulate from the island, and after the Soviet aircrafts shelled, and after the Germans shelled the Soviet aircrafts that were flying over them, our troops have warned the local population and carried out airstrikes on German formations in the ports of cities Roni and Nexe. On May 9, 1945, the Soviet soldiers landed on the island.
Leadership of Denmark has repeatedly thanked the Soviet leadership for liberating Denmark. Foreign Minister Gustav Rasmussen, when he was giving his speech before Soviet soldiers on April 1st, 1946, declared about, and I quote him directly, on deep appreciation of the Danish people for the participation of triumphant Red Army in liberation of Denmark. End of quote. He also emphasized exemplary discipline of Soviet servicemen during their stay on the island and assured them that Denmark will always remember them as their friends. I have a question to Danish Prime Minister. Do you now have other friends? So the Red Army is not a friend of yours any longer now. Who's your friend? Nazi and fascist troops? Regrettably, today Copenhagen, led by the current agenda, is doing to the history what is not allowed to be done with it. So they're trying to defame the military operation of the Soviet Union, Bornholm, trying to justify in the eyes of its own population the current hostile foreign policy of Denmark, a criminal course of policies to support the Kiev regime, the falsified facts about the Soviet contingent. The Danish leadership prefers not to remember the destructive bombardments done by the US and Britain. Danish historians say that 307 Danish died and a large number of kids were also victims of their attack. More than 600 people were injured. It's also silenced that the only country out of anti-Hitler coalition who was deployed on the Danish territory, the USSR was the first country to withdraw its forces. Let me remind you when all this ended, as Danish Prime Minister remember all of that, only in fall 1947. The U.S. is still deployed in the Danish territory, but neither London nor Washington, for some reason, is not called occupying forces by Mette Frederiksen. He's just afraid. I know that. In the context of liberation by the USSR of Bornholm, we would like to emphasize the following fact, namely the negligence by Copenhagen of obligations to administer Bornholm, and I quote it, without any participation of foreign troops. This was enshrined in a note by the Danish side addressed to the government of the USSR. It happened on March 8, 1946. This disregard, this negligence is now manifested in the conduct on the island of provocative military exercise with the participation of the US. We consider such actions by the Danish authorities as the ones countering their own assurances on the inadmissibility of foreign military activity on Bornholm, and the ones that create threats for security, for Russian security in the Baltic region. Now, over to Latvia. It's not news to anyone. One of the despicable episodes covered by media the other day, I'm going to tell you about that. The leadership of the Latvian town of Ogre. And please be patient because you just have to bear what I'm going to tell you. The leadership of the Latvian town of Ogre installed at the entrance of the Art and History Museum granite steps. Well, what would think? What about it? Well, we need steps to enter the building. We have to enter the building somehow, but there is one detail. Those were manufactured from fragments of monuments to Soviet soldiers that were demolished. So where do these stairs lead? They lead to a museum which exhibits blood-stained uniform allegedly belonging to a serviceman who died in the zone of a special military operation. According to reports, it could be turned over to the Latvian neo-Nazis by single-minded individuals of the Kiev fascist junta. If these facts are confirmed, so they are subject to the Russian criminal legislation. So, such actions of the administration of this anti-museum were condemned even in local academic and public circles. They call the exhibition of the uniform unacceptable, said that it's not according to the ethical code of the International Council of Museums and the 1949 Geneva Conventions. One should say that even earlier in the streets of this city, people saw posters depicting soldiers of the Latvian Legion Waffen-SS. They were manufactured with the consent of the head of municipality of the town of Ogre. Maybe the OSCE and UNESCO should be concerned about it. It's about museums, it's about neo-Nazism. In this context, it would be right to remember that in April 2025, Latvian prosecutor's office declared by the termination of a criminal case initiated in 2006 against Gerbert Cukurs. So who is that person? He used to be Gabsturmführer of SS and a member of the RI's commando. Well, I don't know how to quote that properly. This quote-unquote national hero of Latvia during the Second World War commanded mass executions of civilians, including killings of over 30,000 of Jews. I have a question to the Embassy of Israel to Moscow and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Israel. Oh, haven't you heard of it? Well, how come you're turning a blind eye on it? It has to stop. How are you going to look in the eye of your children and grandchildren? According to eyewitnesses, Gerbert Cukurs personally participated in those killings and tortures and was killed in 1965 by the Israel intelligence services in Uruguay, where he fled after the war. Well, then the Israeli leadership knew the history. The world community is now celebrating the Day of the Great Victory over Fascism, as evidenced by the visits of multiple foreign leaders of the solemn parade in Moscow, time to coincide with the 80th anniversary of this event. Meanwhile, the leadership, the leading elite of Latvia continues to feel nostalgic for times where their country was under the authority of Hitler's Germany, when Latvia, together with this Hitler's Germany, committed multiple bloody crimes and targeted multinational Soviet people. Russia condemns this dangerous for the civilized world manifestations of neo-fascism in the Baltic states, and we will counter it. And if you care about the memory of the Holocaust, let's act together. But we have good news as well. On May 8th, during the official visit of President Xi Jinping to Moscow, Ministries of Foreign Affairs of Russia and China signed a joint declaration to further strengthen cooperation to maintain the prestige of international law. This declaration reflects joint views of our countries and international law, the trajectory of its development challenges that we're facing. Russia and China reaffirm their commitment to the UN Charter and principles of international law in all their entirety in interconnectedness. Both countries, Russia and China, intend to together defend world order based on international law and principles of international law. Moscow and Beijing decisively condemn unilateral coercive measures, meaning sanctions, violating international law. We also favor the inviolability of immunity of states and their dignitary stability. It's the key of stable interstate relations. We have agreed to not help third countries in their malified attempts to persecute Chinese and Russian citizens. The declaration also contains provisions on arms control, non-proliferation of mass destruction weapons, combating climate change, plastic pollution, using of ICTs and AI. During the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War, when we formed the basics of fair world order, Russia and China call upon all countries to cooperate to promote fair and equitable international relations. On May 15th, today, we celebrate the 33rd anniversary of the STO, Russia, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. We have experience. It's one of the key elements of the forming architecture of fair, equitable, and indivisible architecture in Eurasia. Measures are taken to develop the potential of the organization further. Foreign policy coordination is developed. Practical cooperation to combat terrorism and extremism is being developed. Counter-narcotics initiatives, transboundary crime, illegal migration are being countered. We progressively develop new areas of cooperation in biological security and safety. Our priority is the preservation of sacred memory of the victory that many people gave their lives for. Leaders of all countries and organizations participated in solemn events, attempts to coincide with the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War. One of the key tasks is to increase the combat readiness, also based on the experience of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. The exercises will be held in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. The peace contingent is now being developed, and now we see new conditions to contribute to UN peace initiatives. The CSTO is ready to cooperate with international cooperations in areas of mutual interest, including as an observer organization and partner organizations. Prospects of further development, strengthening of potential, and increasing the increasing potential, curbing different challenges will be discussed in May and June in Kyrgyzstan during the Council of Defense Ministers and Committee of Security Councillors and of the CSTO. We welcome the agreement to de-escalate the conflict between Islamabad and Delhi, and we hope that this normalization of the situation will be durable and long-standing. We see a very important condition to ensure a stable and long-lasting peace in the region, and we hope that the parties involved will exercise restraint and will not allow any further escalation. Russia has progressively favored the resumption of a dialogue and an increase of level of dialogue between the two countries. We call upon both countries to settle their differences through diplomatic and political means on the bilateral basis. Regrettably, we see a very difficult situation in Tripoli. One of the leaders of Western Libyan groupings was killed while the situation was escalated. The law enforcement agencies and different formations, we saw clashes between them, including in the area of international airport. People were killed and injured, and anti-government individuals were detained. There was a ceasefire agreement in all hotspots of the capital. We call upon the Libyan authorities and their opponents to exercise restraint that could lead to uncontrolled escalation and new casualties among civilians. There are no casualties among our compatriots in Libya. We recommend Russian citizens to avoid going to Libya before the situation goes back to normal. We have noted and also got questions regarding to U.S. executive order on improving safety and security of biological research that provides for termination of financing from state budget of certain activities with hazardous pathogens. Research to enhance properties of pathogens and their transmissibility will not get any funding if there is no proper control on the U.S. part, or if it's not in accordance with American standards, even if they are not on the territory of the U.S. We consider efforts to strengthen control over the activity in biological sphere as an important step. It indicates adjusted approaches towards biosecurity. We remember what the former U.S. administration was doing in this regard. The adoption of this decree means the recognition by Washington of the fact of conduct of research with dangerous pathogens in different regions of the world, including in the vicinity of Russian borders. We have drawn your attention to this in the last couple of years. We have to remember a large-scale work conducted by chemical defense troops commanded by Igor Kirillov, who was killed at the instigation of the Kiev regime. We will give links to his fundamental briefings based on facts and data. These measures are not enough to remove Russian concerns and claims with regards to U.S. biological activity. The state financing of biological research abroad through the U.S. Defense Department will be continued. The document does not restrict such activities if it is controlled by the U.S. and it is in accordance with American standards. So risks to and threats to international security, including as far as the Biological Weapons Convention goes, so these risks are maintained. Now we have to look at different military and biological programs on the territory of Ukraine. It violates BTWC. Russia has tried to get answers with regards to the aforementioned activity. We intend to further ask these questions to get an exhaustive, comprehensive information and explanations. We hope that the current U.S. administration will take necessary steps to settle this unpleasant and very dangerous situation. Biolabs in the Ukrainian territory, they use dangerous pathogens that can be connected with the development of bioweapon components was earlier confirmed by American dignitaries. You remember statements by Victoria Nuland, who was not looking herself when she was saying that. We have repeatedly said, and now we're reiterating it again, that we're open to bilateral contacts with the American side on this subject to eliminate the existing irritants. We hope that Washington will take steps to remove concerns of Russia with regard to military and biological activity by the U.S. to ensure the total compliance of by the American side of obligations within BTWC. We have also paid attention to information disseminated by the media of crimes committed by Anglo-Saxon Afghanistan. Veterans of the British Special Operation Forces told media about that. Some fellow soldiers felt their impunity and regularly committed killings.
Probably think that we're talking about terrorists, but we're talking about unarmed people. They killed off the wounded and even had a competition who killed more. Bloodthirsty, they wanted to settle accounts with Afghans during each of the so-called counter-terrorist operations. Even children fell victims. I'll tell you one more time. This is not fiction, not some kind of propaganda by the Kremlin or somebody else. Those are accounts of those who personally participated in it. To justify these terrible crimes, they planted firearms and fake grenades to the killed. Didn't the same things happen in Syria? They used false reports about operations to avoid investigations. The Afghan authorities draw attention of the then British Prime Minister David Cameron to the killings of civilians by the soldiers of the UK. However, no measures to bring military criminals to justice weren't made. We call on the British authorities to stop keeping silence about these cases and bring to justice all those responsible for killings of civilian Afghans. We receive a lot of question and comment on this topic regularly, but so we accumulated those questions and we want to give one answer. I mean the pensions. We do it because we receive a lot of requests about the situation with pensions and other social benefits to the citizens of Russian Federation abroad. The overall number of those eligible to receive pensions and other social benefits in foreign currency outside the territory of the Russian Federation stands at 84,119 people. They live in 74 countries in the world. Since the first quarter of 2025, because of stronger sanctions, the Gazprom Bank have difficulties with paying off the benefits in euros, including it in Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, and Bulgaria. The Russian side, in good faith and fully fulfills its commitment within bilateral relations. Their blame for the artificial crisis with the financing of pensions for Russian compatriots abroad fully belongs to the Western society and its finance institutes that in essence block transactions from the Bank of the Russian Federation that is authorized to make the transactions. Russia makes active efforts to settle the situation. On May 14th, by the way, we had one more important date, 70 years to the Warsaw Pact organization. It was based on the Treaty on Friendship, Cooperation, Mutual Assistance, signed on May 14th, 1954. We'll publish detailed material about it today on the website of the MFA. The events dedicated to the 80th anniversary of victory will go on throughout the year. Within the St. Petersburg International Legal Forum and CIS Legal Forum is going to take place. There will be a special section, the legal heritage of victory in the Great Patriotic War. The it will discuss the protection of the common heritage of the CIS and the basic principles of the post-war world order. The video address will be sent to the participants by Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Moderator of the section will be special representative of the President of the Russian Federation on International Cultural Cooperation, Mikhail Shvitkoy. The participants of the panel discussion will include representatives of Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, the CIS Executive Committee, as well as Special Rapporteur of the UN Council on Human Rights, Elena Vudov-Gun. We will be happy to see all the participants of the St. Petersburg International Legal Forum as guests of this event. A priority of our country, as you know, it's the international humanitarian track, is promotion of the Russian language abroad. An important contribution on this track belongs to the Kostyumar Forum that is hosted by the Pushkin State Institute of the Russian Language with the support of the Ministry of Science and Higher Education of the Russian Federation and under the auspices of the Commission of the Russian Federation on UNESCO. This year, on May the 21st through 24th, the fifth forum will take place. It will be titled "The Language and Culture." It will be dedicated to the 95th anniversary since the birth of the academician Vitaly Kostyumarov. The forum is going to discuss key issues of the state policy in promotion of the Russian language and culture, broad status of the Russian language at the international arena in certain regions and countries, modern practices in language and culture studies, and other relevant issues. Russian and foreign experts, academicians, teachers, inviters, representatives of the authority, business, and cultural activists will participate. A special place will be given to the topic of the 80th anniversary of the victory. You can get to know the relevant program of the event as well as to file for participation on the website of the forum. One more important event. On May 26th through 30th, Moscow is going to host the 42nd plenary week of the Eurasian Group on Combating Money Laundering and Financing of Terrorism. The group includes 9 countries, 17 more countries, and 24 international regional organizations have observer status. The cooperation is based on principles of equality, mutual respect, and mutual account of interests. Throughout its work, this group has shaped an effective model and partnership that ensure transparency over the financial flows to identify and minimize risks in anti-laundering sphere. The participants include the representatives of the government of the Russian Federation, the Council of Federation of the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation, for monitoring relevant ministries and agencies from Russia and from member states and other observer countries and organizations. In 2024-2025, under the Russian presidency in the group, the measures are realized to strengthen interaction with FATF and other similar international organizations aimed at forming aligned approaches to education and covering events on the Eurasian region. We invite all Russian and foreign journalists to cover this event. In early May, Blog Tour took place for bloggers. It was organized together with Rosmolodaj, the NGO of the Office of World Youth Festival. 35 representatives from 19 countries started tours on memorial sites of the Great Patriotic War. There were 4 routes: Moscow, the Volgograd region, St. Petersburg, the Leningrad region, St. Petersburg, the Republic of Karelia, Moscow, the Tula region. The participants managed not only to get to know the true history of the Great Patriotic War, but only to personally talk to veterans and to learn about the heroic deeds and tragic events from their personal accounts. They shared their impressions in the new media, and I can say for sure that millions of subscribers saw these materials. I would like to mention one more event that was supported by the international youth movement. In May, the week, All Russia Week of Subotniks, dedicated to the year of the Defender of the Motherland and the 80th anniversary of victory, started. Activists from Bulgaria, Belgium, the Czech Republic, Germany, Serbia, Macedonia, Luxembourg, and other countries joined these initiatives. I'm glad that during these difficult times when the West try to rewrite history, the international youth interaction develops and expands. During our briefings, we talk a lot how we fight cancel culture that is practiced actively by the collective West. One of the projects countering disinformation is the initiative Knowledge Award, initiated by the Russian Knowledge Society. It was established for teachers, lecturers, authors, and bloggers in education in order to encourage enlightened projects. This competition is going to take place for the 5th time, and every year it only gains momentum. This time, representatives of 56 countries from almost all the continents are going to participate. There are several stages of selection, and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is a part of the jury. Especially for the year of the Defender of the Motherland in Russia, that declared in 2025 by President of Russia Vladimir Putin, the nomination for contribution to the preserving the memory of the heroic deeds of the defenders of the motherland was established. This contributes to the preservation of the historical memory and true patriotism. An important part is the nomination of Foreign Lighter of the Year, where foreign citizens participate regardless the country they live in. This year, for the first time, regional award ceremonies will take place. Every region of our country will have the best enlightener and the best enlightening project of the year. The applications can be filed until September this year on the website of the project. So I'm ready to take your questions. Is the International Affairs with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. On the 12th of May, the international organization Global Hunger Monitor published a report saying that the population of the Gaza Strip is starving, and 500,000 people are at risk to starve. What can I say about the humanitarian situation in Gaza? Is Russia planning to provide any humanitarian aid? And of course, humanitarian experts and regional experts and states acknowledge that the situation in Gaza Strip, they say it's catastrophic or close to it. It's confirmed by the evaluations of the relevant specialized units of the UN and international non-governmental organizations. I'm not going to cite them, you know them. After Israel introduced a full blockade of the enclave, the situation exacerbated even further. Any international efforts aimed at overcoming this humanitarian crisis won't be effective enough without a broader process of normalization of the situation in Gaza. A priority for today is to achieve a ceasefire as soon as possible that would ensure secure humanitarian access to the sector, as to Russia, which traditionally provides humanitarian aid to the Palestinians, both bilaterally and through specialized UN agencies. Since October 2023, Russia's emergency ministry sent some 800 tons of cargoes. Besides, our country every year contributes to the World Food Program of the UN. $2 million will continue this complex contribution. Thank you. And if I may, one more question. Probably everyone cares about it. Do you have any information about the time of the beginning of the negotiations in Istanbul? I'll tell you one more time. Our delegation is already at Istanbul. Its composition is known. The relevant information was published on the web resources of the Kremlin. These negotiations are going to start in the second half of the day. This is the only credible information. Thanks to you. Thanks to you. Is Vestia with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Question 1. Why France shows such initiative in terms of anti-Russian EU sanctions? Can it and other EU countries to threaten Russia with sanctions in terms of settling the conflict in Ukraine? How can Russia respond to that? Briefly, it does not have any right to threaten. There is no provision in international law providing for that, and France should ensure the international law, but there is no mentioning of such a right in the international law that would give France or any other country to threaten any country with restrictions circumventing the UN Security Council. But it's no surprise. We know that Paris since 2022 is one of the zealous accomplices of hybrid war against our country. It's no news. Read the statement of President Macron. Probably the next day he's going to tell something different about negotiations, about tables, or where they want to sit at. But then the narratives go back to the previous route. But then they start blackmail and to give ultimatums. But the French de facto lead the party of war. They want to be together with the British, the main masters and sponsor of the Kiev regime. France, its leadership, even earlier significantly contributed to the illegitimate sanctions and, as they say, packages. Now they try to blackmail us with more sanctions. Look at this. I'm not saying anything new. Let's look at the statement of President Macron himself. In his address to the nation, he said that he doesn't mean a subtle ceasefire. Now they call for unconditional ceasefire. It's clear that the Western masters of the Kiev regime wants to give it time, but they escalate the situation in general, and they don't even hide it. It was clear long ago that all those packages adopted by the EU has nothing to do with the settlement of the situation in Ukraine. I think even children understand that. This is an element of the policy of deterrent now, of a trade war. It's an attempt to compensate their problems in scientific and technical sphere, and to prevent the humanitarian development of our country and contacts between our people who do not want to be Russophobic and to participate in aggressive anti-Russian campaign start against our country. Look, this comes into this. If they think that those measures are effective to some extent, if they were to have something to do with the settlement of the situation in Ukraine, now you see what happens. They announce a new package and then they announce another one.
As you know, none of these packages won't be left without the corresponding response of the Russian Federation, which will take into account interests of our country and our people. I repeat, these measures will be taken in response to their actions and will continue to do so in the future. And to finish my answer to your question, speaking about the French nationals, attempts by anyone to speak with Russia in the language of threats, blackmail, ultimatums, or even to use derogatory terms in the conversation with us, all these attempts are futile. I'm not even saying that they are illegal because they do not observe any law, but these attempts, again, and I repeat it, are futile. And the most important thing is they need to speak about the results of their manipulations with international law and trust that our country has for their country when they have